Some gods are remembered because they defeat monsters. Some are remembered because they restore kingdoms. But Matsya is remembered because he appeared before disaster, while there was still time to save something. Not as a warrior, not as a king, but as a fish small enough to fit in a man's hands. And that is what makes this story feel so haunting. Because sometimes the thing that saves the world does not arrive looking powerful at all. Sometimes it first arrives as a warning so small that only kindness can recognize it. Matsya is one of the 10 principal avatars of Vishnu in later Hindu tradition. In the best-known version, Vishnu appears as a fish, warns Manu of a coming flood, and rescues life through that deluge. The older Vedic background to the story is tied to flood mythology, and later develops into the Vishnu avatar narrative. That already makes the story memorable. But what makes Matsya unforgettable is not only that he saves the world, it is that he begins by asking to be saved. In the flood legend preserved in early Hindu tradition, Manu encounters a tiny fish while performing ritual acts with water. The fish asks for protection from larger fish, and Manu agrees to shelter it. As the fish rapidly grows, Manu keeps moving it to larger and larger bodies of water until it becomes immense. That detail is beautiful, because the story does not begin with God looking magnificent. It begins with the divine appearing vulnerable. A tiny life, a simpler request, an act of care that seems almost too small to matter. And yet that small act becomes the hinge of everything. Manu protects the fish, and later the fish protects Manu. That exchange is one of the most moving things in the whole story. It suggests that compassion is never wasted, even when it looks insignificant. Sometimes the thing we choose to protect in its smallest form becomes the very thing that saves us when the world begins to collapse. In the standard retelling, once Matsya has grown vast and reveals his true nature, he warns Manu that a great flood is coming. Manu is told to prepare a boat and preserve the seeds of life. Many later versions also include the 7 sages, and some accounts add all kinds of seeds, plants, or living beings that must survive into the next cycle. And that is where the story stops being only mythic and becomes deeply human. Because Matsya is not only the god who rescues, he is the God who warns in time. That matters. So many people imagine salvation as something dramatic that comes after everything is already lost. But Matsya's story suggests another kind of grace. The grace that whispers before destruction. The grace that tells you to prepare. The grace that does not always remove the flood, but teaches you what must be carried through it. That is a harder kind of mercy, but sometimes it is the truest one. Then the flood comes. Waters rise. The world is overwhelmed. Everything stable disappears. In the classical version summarized by Britannica, Manu ties his boat to the horn on Matsya's head, and the fish leads him safely through the cosmic flood. In the broader later tradition, this becomes one of the central images of the Avatar. Vishnu as Matsya guiding life through destruction toward a new beginning. That image is one of the most powerful in Hindu mythology. A boat tied to a horn, a world drowned in water, a single thread of trust holding survival and oblivion apart. And maybe that is why this story still feels so alive now, because almost everyone, at some point, goes through a flood of their own, a season when the old world breaks apart, when certainty disappears, when identity, safety, and routine are washed away. And in those moments, what matters most is not always whether we can stop the waters. Sometimes what matters is whether we know what to carry. Matsya's story understands that. He does not save everything in the same form. He saves continuity, memory, seed, possibility. That is such an important distinction, because after catastrophe, life does not usually return exactly as before. What survives is often smaller than the old world, but enough to begin again. And that may be the deepest emotional truth inside the flood. Not everything is preserved, but the future is. Many later Puranic versions add another layer. After or during the flood, Matsya retrieves or rescues the Vedas from a demon and restores them, so that creation can begin again with knowledge intact. This detail is not present the same way in the earliest version, but it becomes a significant part of the later Matsya mythology. That detail changes the tone of the myth in a beautiful way, because Matsya is not only preserving bodies, he is preserving wisdom, not only survival, but meaning, not only life, but the knowledge that makes life worth continuing. And that is why Matsya feels greater than a flood story. He is the god of rescue, yes, but more than that, he is the god of carrying essence through collapse, the seed, the teaching, the sacred memory, the fragile beginning of the next world. That is why Matsya does not feel like a god of brute strength. He feels like a god of preservation, a god who knows that when destruction comes, the holiest task is not to cling blindly to everything. It is to discern what must survive. And maybe that is why the story begins with something so small. A little fish in a human hand, a choice to care, a life that could have been ignored. Because the story wants us to understand something difficult and tender. The future often arrives in forms that seem too small to matter. A warning, a seed, a promise, a fragile task placed quietly in our keeping. If we dismiss it, the flood will still come. But if we protect it, it may carry us farther than we ever imagined. That is the twist at the center of Matsya's story. The savior first appeared as something needing protection. The one who rescues the world first tested whether a human heart could recognize value before grandeur. And Manu passed that test. He cared before he understood. He protected before he knew he was protecting the divine. That is why Matsya remains such a healing story. Because it tells us that kindness is not naive. Attention is not small. The instinct to protect what is fragile may be one of the most sacred instincts in the world. And when everything else is drowning, those instincts may be exactly what lead the future forward. Matsya is the fish avatar, the guide through the flood, the keeper of seed, wisdom, and continuity, the god who arrived small, warned early, and carried life through ruin. And maybe that is why his story remains, because every age has its flood, and every heart, at some point, must learn the same question Manu learned. When the waters rise, what is too sacred to let disappear? If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments which moment touched you most deeply. And especially, leave a comment sharing which god you want me to make a video about next. Your choice might become the next story on this channel. If this video gave you something to feel or reflect on today, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next emotional mythology story. And if someone came to your mind while listening to Matsya's story, send this video to them too.